want lots from our wearables. And this is the thing, what once seemed absolutely amazing and impossible to fathom would be happening, we now sort of start to go, oh no, it could be better. It's a bit like large language models. Well, why is ChatGPT not doing this better? And our expectations have risen so high.
What do you think about the value of, let's say, fitness trackers and sleep trackers? Do you think that everyone should be wearing them, or what do you think about the efficacy of these devices?
Yeah. I did an experiment about 10, 11 years ago where I wore 4 of the leading devices, and there was huge discrepancy in the results. And in fact, the CEO of one of the companies at the time said to me, well, at least it's consistently inconsistent, so you can keep comparing yourself to yourself with it. It was the best PR line I'd ever heard. But
so how long ago was that, Lara?
I think that was 2015.
Right. That was kind of the beginning of when they started getting really good then, I suppose.
But in the early 2020s, I did a similar experiment with 4 of the leading brands, and the differences were negligible. They'd come a long way. The sensors and the algorithms had really improved. And we were at a point where the recording of data was really accurate. The sleep, not quite as accurate as the other recordings, especially the phasing of the sleep. But in terms of activity, it was a long way from what it was originally, where one had suggested I burnt 3,000 more calories in a week than another, and it wasn't even the one that had thought I'd done 25% more walking. So look, they've got a lot better, and I think that's the first point to make. Secondly, I think the long-term patterns that we see with them are way more important than how many steps you did yesterday, albeit they can motivate you to do steps. 10,000 steps is a pretty arbitrary number. The data is based on 3,000, 4,000 steps. I can't remember the exact number being this sort of massive life-death difference, although obviously doing more is better. We know doing more exercise is better. When it comes to the difference between doing no exercise and doing some, we know the data is absolutely massive on the impact on your health, cardiovascular health, risk of cancer, and so on. So I think wearing these devices and understanding what your baseline is, so you can either see, I've not been moving as much as I have been, I should do more, or more importantly, changes in your sleep pattern, because they can, or your heart rate, because these can represent there are problems. They're not medical devices that are diagnosing, but some of them, like the Apple Watch Series 7, do have medical grade parts, and they can see that something is amiss, which might mean that you would go to a doctor and investigate something further. It may mean nothing, but it could actually see something meaningful. And there's been lots of cases of people having
like heart
diagnosis.
Rate abnormalities, for instance,
I've just written a feature on this for Magazine, actually, because there have been a lot of cases where people have found life-threatening conditions as a result of seeing something wasn't right and then going to see a doctor. So there is this element, but longer term, we're going to be able to understand even more from these patterns and what is our normal and what changes. So I think they're incredibly useful. And I just think long-term data on ourselves, albeit some scientists refer to this as dirty data because it's not in a lab, it's not under scientific conditions, you might take your watch off for a bit, but I think there's enormous use. The only question comes for people who become very anxious when they know too much, where they become very worried about their sleep that might stop them from sleeping if they feel they're not getting enough. And I've had so many of these conversations with people because of what I do and the fact I'm often wearing a lot of trackers. I'm about to do an experiment with 5 of the leading smart rings and wear them all at the same time. So people will be asking,
what's the most you've wore at one given moment then, Lara? How many wearables have you wore at one given moment? Let's say for an entire 24-hour period.
6. I mean, I tend to do it for a week.
I've done 2 of that.
2, that's all. I always wear 2. I think 6 is probably the most. I've added continuous glucose monitor and a watch that aims to do your glucose as well.
What are you most impressed with then in terms of the wearables you've got then? Is it the sleep analysis? What has had the most impact on you personally?
Well, what I do actually think is very interesting is what you can learn from the data at population levels. So for me, I love wearing my ring because I track my sleep and I have this great pattern of what I've been doing without obsessively checking step numbers that I could do on the watch that I wear, which I still wear because I've had it for ages and I love it for payment. But personally, I would choose a ring. But I think the data at population level is teaching us a lot about sleep, about culture, about behavior around the world. And I think it's fascinating that in Asia, particularly Southeast Asia, people are getting the least amounts of sleep, having fewer, if any. I mean, lions at the weekend are just not even a thing, really. Aura has collected data on Aura ring wearers all around the world, and it's amazing for being able to understand these sorts of patterns.
So obviously we've got all these amazing wearables, and I just get excited about where these are going to be in 10 years as opposed to where they are now. Do you know what I mean? If they're this good now, what are they going to be like in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? But you couple that with AI innovation, and I honestly believe, Lara, and please tell me what you think, that we are not far away from having essentially an AI agent in our pocket who has access to our DNA data, to our wearables data, and is basically coaching us in terms of our longevity potential. We've got like Brian Johnson in our pocket, basically telling us, you need to do exercise more next week, you need to now an hour more sleep, you need to eat less carbs, maybe you could chuck a blood sugar monitor in with that as well for even more, robust advice.
You are spot on with where this is going. And there are lots of companies that are trying to create the platforms to be able to do all of that. And I've had a couple contact me already, things that do already exist. But that's totally where we're going. I think one of the game-changing elements here is things being seamless, frictionless. You're not noticing that you're being tracked, but they are. And when I was at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas this year, but one of the things I saw there, one of the less glamorous things I saw there, was a monitor down a toilet that looked a bit like in the 1980s, where you would have, well, you're probably too young for this, but you'd have these sort of bleach things down the toilet. You floss the chain, it would make the water go blue. It looked like one of these things that would sit down the toilet, but it was actually monitoring urine. And so the idea was that when you got up in the morning, your urine was being monitored every day without needing to do anything. There were also
That's going one
mirrors.
step. That's going the extra mile, that is, isn't it?
Well, it is. But what's interesting about that, and mirrors which can assess your blood pressure, your risk of depression, your risk of type 2 diabetes, just by looking at you. And it's quite early days for a lot of this stuff. But the idea of any of these things being seamlessly just there in your life, that you're not conscious you're using them, you're not having to charge them or anything because they're just there functioning. The mirror's plugged in, and maybe the thing down the toilet would need a battery change, and goodness knows, I didn't want to ask too many details. But the idea of more and more data being collected to understand way more biomarkers than even our wearables are is probably where things are heading, because that will help us identify a lot more problems when things go amiss.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What wearables have you been most impressed with recently, Lara, that you've reviewed? Anything like that wouldn't be on the sort of radar of most people that you've been particularly shocked by, or something that's maybe hasn't been released yet?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, I've done a few things for meditation and relaxation. I mean, personally, I'm not a big fan of these things. I don't feel particularly stressed in the first place. And
like Headspace and those type of...
Yeah, and there was one, it was actually came in a wearable sports top, and I think it could come in all different forms, where it was assessing your heart rate and giving you a meditation alongside its readings. And so I've tested various things like this, and I think as a personal preference, they're just not things that I'm particularly interested in. So those haven't hugely excited me, whereas just standard wearables and how much better they're getting does. Yeah. That's way more interesting to me. Something that I thought was really interesting was the device that you breathe into after you've eaten. And there's a couple of different versions of this, but the OMED, which is one which would be given by a doctor, is a small, unfortunately I haven't got it here on my desk at the moment, but it looks like the size of a computer mouse. Don't breathe into your mouse, that's not a good idea. But you blow into it after each meal, and it will measure the chemicals in your breath to assess the reaction to the food you've been eating. So if you're having digestive issues and you know it's not fructose, it's not lactose, you've ruled out Crohn's disease, celiac disease, you know it's none of those things, but you're just wanting to find how you could alter your life to be more comfortable, and massive, massive stats on how many people have IBS in the UK, that could be really useful. So whilst it's not a wearable, it is a sort of trackable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So do you know, in terms of all these data platforms that are, data collection via wearables, we talked about this, in your pocket AI agent coaching you for longevity purposes. How do you see this playing out? Google have acquired Fitbit, so they're obviously a giant in this space right now. You got other companies like Aura and stuff, and Garmin, who have sort of retained their sort of independent status. But this is going to be an absolute fight to the death to own this space, because it's going to be massive, isn't it, in the longer term?
Of course.
How do you see this playing out, Lara?
Well, I imagine the variety of brands will continue and they will continue to battle against each other. From what I see with people that I talk to, I mean, just anecdotally, people I talk to every day, people who are quite serious runners or quite serious golfers may have a Garmin device, although they may also wear a Fitbit, because I do actually see many who only put on their sporting watch for the sporting activity, even though it could be used as a tracker all the time. And I think the smart ring element is going to grow massively throughout a variety of brands. I don't think this is just Aura. I think that's something that's absolutely transforming the wearables market, because with wrist-worn wearables, my personal frustration, and this was my thought on the Whoop actually, was if I'm going to wear something on my wrist, I'd like it to tell the time as well. So the idea of a wearable that you've got to have the thing on your wrist and it doesn't even give you the time is quite frustrating to me personally.
Yeah,
so I'm sure other people feel that. Yeah,
I miss the time and the ability to pay for things. Like, do you know what I mean?
That's what I was going to say.
Watch.
Payment is the other thing. And I wore for a little while a payment ring. So I had on an Aura and a payment ring on this finger, but the company actually stopped it. It got discontinued after a while. It obviously wasn't popular. Never. It was quite funny because I'd go and pay and I'd be doing this to the credit card machine, holding my hand flat against it. And it kept on not working.
But you had some funny looks doing that.
Well, yes, because it's obviously, I remember doing it in the early days of the watch and people thought it was odd. But obviously you look terribly strange because no one knows what you're doing with the ring. And when it doesn't work, you really look like, what on earth are you doing? And then I was demonstrating this on TV one day on Lorraine. And the company contacted me afterwards and said, oh, by the way, the reason that your ring isn't working when you're doing like that is you have to behave like you're punching it with a fist towards the machine.
Yeah. Look a bit more cool, bit more fist bump in it.
I know,
sort of thing.
It was like fist bumping the machine. And it did work better actually like that. But it just wasn't something that really took off. I suppose one of the questions with it may have been the security of how, and I can't remember, there may have been a limit as to how much you could spend, but the security of it working, because with an Apple Watch, for example, you've got to put in that PIN code after it's on your wrist before you can use the payment anyway. But with the ring, you wouldn't be able to put in the PIN code on the ring. You'd have to have it on the app, which I guess would be possible. But yeah, we want lots from our wearables. And this is the thing, what once seemed absolutely amazing and impossible to fathom would be happening, we now sort of start to go, oh no, it could be better. It's a bit like large language models. Well, why is ChatGPT not doing this better? And our expectations have risen so high.
Yeah, but they are coming along so quickly as well, though. So they are they're just getting better and better. I basically put the bot on last night because my daughter needed some ideas to do something for school, and I spoke ChatGPT and I put the bot on. And I said, "Hi Gareth, how are you doing? Do you want to have a chat about Be Digital, the company?" And I was like, "No, my daughter wants to ask you for some ideas on some school project." And she was in, "Hi, how you doing?" And started talking to my daughter. It was literally like she thought she was on the phone to one of my friends or something. It was so realistic. It's crazy.